sort of more than just a few sentences, because we'll be talking about nutrition differently, but that slide is just to make the point, again, about brain. What is our brain? So we know how much it weighs, and we've learned about the surface area. But what is our brain really made up of? I mean, in a chemical sense, not in a biological sense, it's made up of cells. But in a chemical sense, what are the constituents of our brains? So if we take that 1.5 kilo organ out of someone's skull, by the way, Kay, who has volunteered for that? Anyway, so we take out that brain and we put it in an oven. We turn the heat up to 100 degrees centigrade. And we keep the brain in there for 3, 4, 5 hours. And then we open the oven and we take out the brain. What do we actually have? What happens at 100 degrees centigrade? Water evaporates. That's the evaporation temperature of water. So what we actually have is a brain with no water. So we have a dry brain, what we call the dry weight of the brain. Now, a lot of the brain is water, just like a lot of our bodies is water. When we are born, a young newborn baby, 74% of their bodies is water. As we age, we become drier. Some of us even look it. But actually our body's water content decreases through the life cycle. And that is the most prominent change of aging. We become drier, down to about 50% water when we are 80. So that's why hydration is so unbelievably important for human beings. But anyway, we take the brain, bake it at 100 degrees for a couple of hours. We have a dry weight of the brain, no water in there. 75% of that is made up of fat. Our brains are unbelievably fatty organs. They're just like, when you touch them or when you eat them, in some countries, brain are sheep or even cow's brains are considered a delicacy and are cooked and served in restaurants. But when you touch the brain or when you eat it, it's even fattier and sort of buttery-like in consistency, way more than pâté, the foie gras. They're really, really, really fatty. About 74% is fat of the brain. Now, you would all know what happens if you took out a slab of butter and left it outside for a while, for 5, 6, 7 days. Well, back home it would melt, but here it wouldn't, obviously. Nothing melts here, but anyway, you look at a slab of butter that was left on whatever, on your kitchen counter for a couple of days. What happens to the sort of outside of it? It's rancid, it changes its color and it stinks. So it goes rancid, which is just a chemical process of the fat in the butter, which is just about all fat, interacting with the oxygen in the air. So it's sort of the equivalent of rust. If you left out a piece of iron, after a while it would go, sort of be covered by a layer of rust, so which is oxidized iron. So the rancid, stinking butter is butter that has been oxidized. Now, every time we take a breath, our bloodstream takes up a lot of oxygen, moves it around the whole of our bodies. 25% of the oxygen goes to keep our brains working. So our brains are flooded with oxygenated blood, and because our brains are really, really, really fatty, they are at a risk of becoming rancid. Yeah, they are oxidized, just like butter. Now, you wouldn't want that to happen to your brain. So we need, and the body has lots of mechanisms which are activating antioxidants. They are countering that natural tendency of fat and oxygen to go bad together. One of the best, most effective antioxidants in nature is coffee. That's why we need a lot of coffee. We, that is men, we need about 3 cups of coffee a day, while women, probably because they have a much larger brain area, need 5 to 6 cups of coffee a day to reduce their risk of stroke or Alzheimer's disease by about 20%. Now, coffee also improves our chances of staying alive. When we do large, by large I mean 400,000 people enrolled in research, 1 million people enrolled in research, and we follow them up for 10 years. People who drink that amount of coffee have a 10% better chance of staying alive for that duration than people who don't. So coffee keeps your brain from getting oxidized, but also through other mechanisms is actually quite healthy for you. Please.
What about tea? Can you substitute?
Yeah, people always ask me about tea. Nobody would ask me about tea in the Middle East. Coffee is the big thing, but no. Tea has been proven to be very, very, very positive for our cardiac health, for our hearts. No studies have shown that similar effect on our brains. We don't know what the difference is, but there is a difference. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about foods. So drink your coffee.
Are they double shots?
How would I know?
Like a double shot, 3 double shots work as 6?
So people ask about decaffeinated coffee and lots of questions about coffee. We can talk about that a bit later. But basically, when we say studies have proven that or demonstrated that coffee is positive in its antioxidant effects for the brains, most of the studies come from the States. And when they say coffee, they mean percolated coffee, which is sort of the equivalent of plunger coffee here. That sort of coffee. Decaffeinated, people always ask me about decaffeinated. Well, nobody has ever done any studies on decaffeinated coffee because it is a very small minority of people who regularly drink only decaffeinated coffee. Coffee is the most common drug of abuse in the human population. There are more people who are, if you like, coffee drinkers than people who smoke or drink alcohol or use cannabis or cocaine or, meth. So coffee is the greatest drug of abuse by human beings, and that's why we concentrate on studying it.
Does it not have a dehydrating effect, though?
No, it doesn't have a dehydrating effect. It has a diuretic effect, yes. Caffeine will make you urinate more, but not to the effect that it would dehydrate you, no way. Another important issue is hygiene, oral hygiene. People who have problems with sore gums and a lot of caries and their hygiene of their oral hygiene isn't up to par are at least 10% worse on memory tests than people who keep their mouths really healthy. Healthy in the medical sense. I don't care what comes out of their mouths, but I mean their gums and their teeth, etc. So we don't know why that is. A lot of researchers are saying that this is an indirect measure of someone's general social economic status and medical well-being. Because people who are really poor can't afford dentists. Dentists are really, really expensive, and dentures and everything is quite expensive. So in many, many studies, when we look at poor people, one of the indicators is that their teeth are really bad. So is that just an indication of being poor and less educated and having less access to general medical care and to good food, etc.? Or is there something unique about that? We think it's a combination of both, because we know that there is a unique pathological association between bad oral hygiene and your chances of suffering from a heart attack, from a myocardial infarction. Because again, the immune system comes into play, trying to contain the infection and inflammation, producing a lot of substances that try to contain that, but these substances, again, are taken up by your bloodstream and are extremely damaging to your heart muscles, but also apparently to your brain. Hearing. Nearly 1 in 10 people can be saved, if you like, from having Alzheimer's disease if they were to measure their hearing in midlife and take action to correct any midlife hearing impairment. As simple as that. And I put it to you that we are all, well, not me, but you guys are going to vote in September? I wouldn't vote for a party that doesn't promise free audiometry, free hearing testing, and free hearing aids to anyone in New Zealand. I wouldn't vote for them. It's like saying we are taking away one of the important protective factors from Alzheimer's disease from you, because hearing tests and hearing aids are quite expensive and not everyone can afford them. So I think a responsible party, a responsible government would do that for its citizens. And don't believe them when they tell you there isn't enough money to go around. That's complete nonsense. And on a personal note, my partner and I came here from a country whose 54% of its expenditure is on its army, which is completely ridiculous, but that's what it is in the Middle East. We're in the business of killing each other. But you come here, and then I sort of, after a couple of months, I realized that New Zealand actually has an air force. I mean, seriously? An air force? Like, why waste all that money instead of investing it in social relationships or helping people with their hearing aids? What do you need an air force for? I mean, for God's sake, who's going to come here and attack New Zealand? Or who are you going to conquer in the next couple of generations? I mean, seriously, doesn't that... And it's millions and millions and tens of millions annually being spent on maintaining an air force? I mean, I can understand Navy. There's a lot of issues because, I mean, New Zealand is an island state, but an air force? Unbelievable. So don't believe your party when it says, well, we don't have money for everything. Well, you do. You just have to know where to spend your resources. Make sure, now we are talking about a significant number of people who will be at a great risk of Alzheimer's disease if they are not tested and treated for that. Hearing loss in midlife. Completely ridiculous, not very difficult to pick up. I mean, my partner says I'm losing my hearing. That's just because I just don't listen, but nothing wrong with my hearing, I just don't listen, like most men. Anyway, we're talking about a huge effect on our memories. People with hearing impairment have a 30 to 40% faster progression to Alzheimer's disease. This is significant. We're not talking about just a minor something in the background. Again, I won't get into that for the sake of having enough time to answer questions at the end. Superfoods are just a great idea to sell the ODT or any other daily newspaper. They have nothing significant to do with our brain health. But every week there is a story in the newspapers. It's turmeric or curcum, which are the same thing actually, or coconut oil, or ginkgo biloba was very popular in Europe for a while, or whatever. Wild rice and this and that. There are no superfoods, although my partner makes me eat kale chips, whatever. I mean, I think she wants me dead. But anyway, kale is not a superfood. It's really good for you, but it's not a superfood in the sense that the newspapers are trying to sell it. There is no one single ingredient of food that if you loaded your body with it would give you great protection from brain aging or even from Alzheimer's disease. No. What we eat is a complex combination of foods. On average, in a day, people eat anywhere from 60 to 117 different components of food. So not a single component would make a change for your brain. We need a nutritional plan, and as I told you, there is one designed and paid for by the US government. It took them about 4 years and $260 million to come up with that plan. It's quite brilliant, we'll be talking about it. Just don't smoke. I mean, seriously? Anyone still smoking? Probably had your last cigarette before you came here. I mean, don't ever light up again. This is ridiculously bad. Now some people say, well, I've been smoking for 20 or 30 or 40 years. Too late. It's never too late. People who stop smoking 12 to 15 years down the line reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease back to that of people who have never smoked. They will still pay a heavy price with their lungs and their hearts and other issues, but at least they will be saved from the adverse effects of smoking on our brains. Because smoking is not just about the smoke. There are 480 different chemicals which enter our bloodstream through our lungs every time we smoke a cigarette. And some of them are carcinogenic, they will give you cancer, but some of them are neurotoxic, they will kill brain cells in your head. So you don't really want to smoke. And it's quite expensive. Just spend the money on something more enjoyable. I mean, a great film is going to be shown here for the next 3 weeks. Just about getting to the last slide. Research shows that even 10 minutes of socializing a day would protect your brain significantly from Alzheimer's disease. People who are lonely, and we'll get into that and how we measure that in our next meeting, people who are lonely are at a 3 times higher risk of suffering from Alzheimer's disease. Not only that, but social isolation and loneliness will kill you. Your chances of dying because you are lonely are much higher than your chances of dying because you are smoking and having high blood pressure. Loneliness is a killer. Human beings are social animals. We can't do without social interactions. Our brains are uniquely designed to interact with other people. Just think about it for a second, you'll realize it's true. When we talk to our kids or whatever, we tell them that maybe the bees or the ants are social sort of animals, organisms. Well, they are, but not as much as we. There is not a single organism in the world that is more socially dependent than humans. For survival in the basic sense, but also in the psychological sense. We can't do well when we are on our own if we are lonely. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, obviously, but we're talking about people who are lonely. That's as bad as you could do for your brain, is be lonely. Problem with loneliness we'll talk about, but just imagine someone who's just been born. So he's raised by hopefully his parents or her parents. So you interact with 2 people, or if you have any sibs, you interact with 3 or 4 people for a couple of years, but then you are moved into a kindergarten, here or any other form of, in different cultures there will be different patterns or rituals, but you will move out of your nuclear family into a more extended social group, be it a kindergarten or a school or whatever your tribe comes up with. And suddenly you have to understand and react and act and behave in a way that is acceptable to 20 or 30 or 40 people, some of them your age, some younger, some older. There are expectations, there are manners and rituals, and nobody gives you a handbook how to get through kindergarten. You know, don't hit other kids, don't do that. No one tells you, you have to pick it up because your brain is uniquely attuned to social cues. Now when you go abroad to OE or just whatever, on a trip to enjoy yourself or to work, and you move into, even for a couple of days or hours, into a different culture, you feel how you're inadequate. You don't know. What are the rules of engagement? How close do you stand to someone when you talk to them? Way, way, way closer where I grew up than here, but not as close as you would stand to someone next to someone in Turkey, much closer than in Israel. It would be completely different business in France. Do you touch anyone? You get up in the morning, you go to work. So a colleague of yours, let's say of the same rank, is also sort of, you park together, you get out of your car, and now you're walking towards the office. How do you greet them? Do you touch them? Different countries, different rules. You have to pick all that up without anyone really telling you about it. And the complexities of finding a partner, we don't teach our adolescents how to go about it, but there is that, whatever, social code at work, in intimacy, in families, in any other social gathering, etc., etc., etc. So our brains are unique in their ability to pick up and learn all those cues, and they are unbelievably important to keep our brains healthy. There are other advantages to socializing. You're lonely, you're really, really in trouble, both physically and Alzheimer or memory-wise, and you need a minimum of 10 minutes of socializing a day. One of the problems of aging is that loneliness is significantly more profound as we age than for younger people, because we lose friends or partners, and because our kids, go up, go away, etc., 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 and we are retired, so we don't have all those interactions at work, and maybe our mobility is limited, etc., etc. So a unique challenge as we age to keep up our social interactions. And last but not least for today, I won't talk much about meditation, but as I said, get Zen. So about 2,500 years ago, the Buddha was enlightened, and he taught us the four truths, the first being that we are born to suffer, but he also said that if we practice a certain way of life, called nowadays Buddhism, which has a lot of issues and about how to practice it, but one of the main practices inherent in being a Buddhist is meditation. Meditation keeps our brains forever young. So, if I was to tell you that I can teach you really, really, really quickly, I mean in just a couple of maybe 5 or 6 half-an-hour meetings, I could teach you how to make your bodies 20 years younger. How much would you pay for that? Any offers? If I was serious about that, people would line up and pay a huge amount of money if I could prove and deliver that I can make your bodies 20 years younger. Meditation makes your brains 20 years younger. We call it the forever younger practice. When we do brain scans of people who have meditated throughout their lives, and I'm not talking about, Tibetan monks who went to a cave and just sat there for 25 years meditating. I'm talking about sort of you and I, people who have a life, a family, a job, commitments, sort of Western, if you like, way of life, but who take anywhere from 12 to 20 minutes a day to sit down, not necessarily on a cushion, you can sit on a chair or you can meditate jogging. My beloved monk in my Sangha taught me to meditate while jogging. He said, well, you're no good meditating sitting. You just don't have it in you. So he taught me how to meditate while I jog. So you can walk and meditate, or run and meditate, or sit in a chair, or sit on a cushion, or even lie in bed and meditate. But if you give yourself 12 to 20 minutes a day of meditation, mindfulness meditation, and when we take thousands and thousands, about 5,000 people agreed to have their brains scanned. So we scanned their brains. These were 5,000 people who were 80 years old and have been meditating anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes daily most of their lives. And we had another 5,000 people, the control group, people who are 80 years old, but never meditated. And they had the same education, the same health problems, etc., etc., etc. So they were not different on any other variable. And we scanned their brains too. So we had 10,000 brain scans. We gave them to radiologists and we told them, listen, there are two groups of people here. We, of course, mixed them all up, the brain scans. And just separate them into two groups with whatever criteria you find proper. That's all we told them. Came back a couple of days later and they said, well, that's no biggie. There are obviously people here who are about 80, about half of them, and there are people here who are about 60 or 55 years old. Now everyone was 80 years old. And the people who, neurologists, looked at their brain scan and said, oh, that's a 55, 60-year-old man or woman, or they looked at the brain and said, oh, that's an 80-year-old brain. The only difference was that the younger looking brains, and the younger brains, by about 20 years younger on any parameter a neurologist could give you, were of people who are meditating daily. So you want to be 20 years younger in your brain? I can teach you. Just come back in 2 weeks or 4 weeks or wherever we're talking about meditation. So I want to thank you for your very, very, very patient attention. We've sort of just about gone over the time, but I'm happy to give you a couple of more minutes if you have any questions. And thank you for your attention, and thank you, Kay, for your patience.
depression more common in old people?
Well, thank you for that question. The question was, is depression more common in old people? Actually, no, less common. But that's sort of not really the truth. Because what we call in scientific terms major depressive disorder is less common in the elderly. It's actually a disease of much younger people. But if we talk about what we call minor depression or subsymptomal depression, sort of depression that's not as bad as the one that you would find in younger people, but still sort of a less severe form of depression, that is way more common in the elderly. So it's sort of a yes and no answer.
Depression is more common in women, and Alzheimer's is also more common in women, is it right?
Well, yes and no. Depression, fortunately for us men, is way more common in women than in men. That probably has to do with the fact women have to live with us. Probably not the reason, there are many other reasons, but yes, depression is significantly more common in women, about 3 or 4 or 5 times more common in women than in men. Alzheimer's disease is just about equal between men and women, just about equal.
Can you just give, is it a working definition of Alzheimer's?
Oh, we will next time, but I'll give it now as well after I answer a few more questions. Yes.
If you start to meditate now, will it turn the clock back?
Hmm?
If you start to meditate now, will it turn
Great question. Just like everything else, well, yes, in a way, because we have not a lot, but we have decent evidence showing that people who are not suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's disease, but are not normal in their brain function, they're already doing less well in their memory and language than you would expect, but not as bad as saying they're suffering from Alzheimer's. So they're sort of in a gray zone. They're maybe in a prodromal stage or maybe very early stages of the disease. If they start meditating, their risk of converting to full-blown dementia is reduced significantly. So it's never too late. But, I mean, I wouldn't invite you to wait until you're just about ill and then start meditating. You should do it, well, tomorrow morning. What is Alzheimer? And thank you for that question, because we've been saying Alzheimer and dementia. Well, we need to define that, don't we? The dementias, although that word is actually out of circulation because the American Psychiatric Association has decided that the word dementia is stigmatizing and we should never use it again. So they came up with another name, but we still use that word. The dementias are a group of about 128 disorders. All of them clinically may seem the same to someone who is not a specialist in the area. They are all disorders of old age. They all increase tremendously as you age. They are all progressive. They don't stop. It's not like if someone has a car accident and they, whatever, lose a part of their brain in surgery because they had a bleed and whatever. So if you tested them before the car accident and a few months later, you would see there was a difference in their performance. But that difference would then stay the same for the next 20, 30 years. Dementias are always progressive. So when you test someone with dementia today, and in 6 months and in 2 years, you would see that they're getting worse. So they are all disorders of old age, most of them. There are some dementias which are typical of young people that are very rare. So they are associated with aging, they are progressive, and the syndrome is characterized by problems in higher cognitive function, that is in memory and orientation and recognition. So you look at someone and you just don't know who they are. You know, that blank look that my partner gives me sometimes, I'm sure she doesn't know who I am. But no, you don't recognize people. Right? So sometimes you still retain that vague memory that that person is someone who is important to you. So you ask someone suffering from dementia, who is that? I mean, not you, I mean, sorry. But, and they would say about their partner, they say, that's my sister. So they remember that that's a family and a close, important relationship. And then later, a few years later, they would say, I know, I never met that person, although they've been living with them for, whatever, 60 years. So language and memory and orientation and the ability to perform activities like to eat. Sometimes people suffering from dementia would sit there, just stare at their food. They can't remember how to use the utensils to bring the food into their mouth, or they no longer recognize whatever there is on the plate as food. You ask them what that is, and there is like, whatever, I don't know, chicken or potatoes, I don't know. So, and also the complex decision-making functions of our brains go bad. And we can't make complex decisions because we can't remember and weigh the pros and cons of making a decision. So the syndrome may look the same, sort of a problem with memory. Language becomes very restricted. Someone had a very rich vocabulary and would speak with long, sort of intelligent sentences, would sort of have what we call a telegraphic language, yes, no, and they wouldn't remember the name of something, and sometimes people don't pick that up even with their partners because they would say, can you please get me that? Or can you bring that from the kitchen? And because you live with someone for so many years, you know what they mean, and you don't realize that they're actually not able to say the name of whatever object it is they're asking for. So language becomes very restricted. Memory obviously is badly affected, but also our emotions change, and there's a lot of personality changes that go with dementia. But as I said, there are a group of disorders, about 128 of them, that under the category of dementia. The most common and most researched and most prevalent is Alzheimer's disease, which is named after Alzheimer, who was a psychiatrist in Germany, and he had a patient who obviously had Alzheimer's disease in retrospect, and he followed her and treated her until she passed away, and then he, in the post-mortem, he cut up and looked with a microscope into her brain, and he was the first scientist to describe the specific changes in our brains that are typical of Alzheimer's disease. And when he published that, sort of the findings, it was decided to call the disease after his name. But they are very, very prevalent. As I said, if we all make it to 85, about 45% of us will have to struggle with some form of dementia, most commonly Alzheimer's disease. But as I said, our grandchildren will have it much harder if we don't do something about preventing it. And that's what we'll be sort of talking about next 4 meetings. Finally, last meeting talking about what interventions have been proven and what we can do about preventing Alzheimer's disease, not just in a general sense that we were talking about today, because this was sort of an introduction to what the brain is and what are the basic things we need to put in place to keep our brains healthy in the sense that not specifically prevent Alzheimer's disease, but just prevent age-associated changes in our brains, keep our brains younger in a way. So get a good night's sleep, meditate, drink a good cup of coffee tomorrow morning. Won't say anything about what you're going to eat for breakfast, we'll keep that for another day. Exercise, meet with friends, play bridge, go see a great challenging film in the festival. There are some fantastic films coming along. And don't forget to come back in 2 weeks. And thank you for your patience.